Paris, breaking point, Zelensky flips the table. While Moscow stalls, Volodymyr Zelensky moves first and forces the world to move with him. Security guarantees are locked in. The United States commits. France and Britain sign, troops and bases included. Germany crosses the line it swore it never would. This isn't diplomacy, this is pressure, coordinated, relentless, unstoppable. Europe is no longer debating, it is acting. Weapons flow, bases rise, routes open. Partners back Ukraine without limits and without fear. The Kremlin feels it already. Fires at refineries, collapsing grids, panic behind the walls. Trump turns cold, Putin runs out of time. Details you won't hear elsewhere right now. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Faravanova here with the latest updates. Urgent! The latest meeting between Ukrainians, Europeans and Americans in Paris changed everything. US negotiators have finally given the green light for peace. Ukraine and the United States reached an agreement, leaving Russia's ambitions out in the cold.
We believe we have essentially completed the work on the security protocols. What matters is that the Ukrainian people know this. When it ends, it will end for good.
At the same time, Steve Witkoff, the US President's special envoy, added that the United States and Ukraine are very close to finalizing an agreement focused on the country's post-war prosperity.
Thank you to America for its readiness to provide a backstop across all areas. Security guarantees, ceasefire monitoring, and reconstruction.
Meanwhile, the key signatures are already in place. Volodymyr Zelensky, Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer have signed the document in Paris. It's now official. France and the United Kingdom are deploying troops to Ukraine and establishing bases across the country.
We are closer to this goal than ever before, but the hardest yards are still ahead.
Security guarantee documents between Ukraine and the United States are ready. This was announced by Volodymyr Zelensky at the joint press conference in Paris with the leaders of France, the United Kingdom and Germany, as well as the US President's special envoy Steve Witkoff, following the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing.
We believe the bilateral security guarantee documents, Ukraine-America, are ready, as well as trilateral documents. We expect that signing may be possible in the near future, and we are already working through these formats. God willing, we will truly succeed.
He emphasized that he values the United States' readiness to back forces tasked with preventing a repeat of Russian aggression, and stressed that these security guarantees must be grounded in legally binding commitments, including approval by the US Congress. Volodymyr Zelensky also said that during meetings with the heads of the US delegation, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, significant progress was made with the American negotiating team in working through the documents. Speaking to journalists, President Volodymyr Zelensky assessed Russia's readiness for the ceasefire, saying Ukraine has partners capable of twisting the Kremlin dictator's arm if necessary.
The Americans are definitely talking with the Russians and discussing various options. For now, Russia is stalling, but our partners are strong enough, some of them especially so, and they can twist their arm if they choose.
Meanwhile, partners are not standing aside and are actively seeking a path to a just peace in Ukraine. European Council President Antonio Costa stated that the agreement on security guarantees is a key step toward achieving a just and lasting peace, emphasizing that Ukraine's accession to the EU is a crucial security guarantee in its own right.
Yesterday's agreement on security guarantees is a key step in our work towards a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Ukraine's accession to the EU is a crucial security guarantee in its own right. It is a proven path to a more prosperous and stable future for the country. Our work is rapidly advancing.
Meanwhile, Europe is going all in support. Sweden announced it will provide Gripen fighter jets for air surveillance, naval assets to help demine the Black Sea, and training for Ukrainian officers. Belgium is contributing aviation, naval forces, and training, while the Czech Republic will supply large-caliber ammunition. And then, a true diplomatic shockwave. Germany has for the first time agreed to help monitor a ceasefire in Ukraine. Berlin has spoken definitively.
We will take responsibility for the security of Ukraine and for the security of the entire continent.
Events are unfolding right now. Europe is seizing the initiative decisively and on display. Brussels is rolling out its strongest arguments. London is in for a long haul. A partnership announced, striking the Kremlin harder than any statement. Romania opens a new route. A powerful logistics hub is taking shape. Arms flow are intensifying, and Germany is back in works with real money. For Moscow, it's a blow below the belt. Details ahead.
Europe is stepping up its support for Ukraine on all fronts at once. Weapons, money and political backing at the negotiating table.
It should be noted that Ukraine's position largely depends on its European strategic partners. These are first and foremost the United Kingdom and France.
From the very beginning of the full-scale war, the United Kingdom has provided crucial support to Ukraine.
The United Kingdom was the first to offer Ukraine an agreement. on military technical cooperation, and moreover, we're talking about long-term cooperation. In other words, it was made clear that the very existence of the Ukrainian state was not in question. And note, this was during the most intense fighting with the Russian Federation.
Europe also continues to strengthen Ukraine militarily. More and more EU countries are joining the Pearl Initiative and purchasing air defense systems, artillery, ammunition, and armored vehicles for Ukraine.
At this very moment, the significant possibility of opening a brand new, second, and much larger logistics hub in Romania is actively being considered, which, in terms of its impressive logistical capabilities and overall operational efficiency, will undoubtedly surpass the currently existing logistics hub located in Poland.
At the same time, finances. The new plan from the European Commission envisions large-scale support for Ukraine over the next 2 years. A key role in this is played by the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
The member states have agreed to finance Ukraine through loans on the capital markets totaling 90 billion euros over the next 2 years. Importantly, Ukraine will only begin to repay the loan after receiving reparations. Until then, the frozen Russian assets will remain blocked, and the Union retains the right to use the available funds to finance the loan.
Germany also understands the value of supporting Ukraine as they realize that security depends on it, and within Europe itself.
In any case, as long as I have the opportunity to express my opinion, we will not repeat the mistakes of 2014, which left Ukraine even more vulnerable to Russian access without security guarantees.
As a result, financial assistance for 2026 was also announced.
The German government announced an increase in military technical assistance to Ukraine to 11 billion, that is 2.5 times more. And this is, first and foremost, a political signal to the Russian Federation. It shows that the Western countries, especially those on the European continent, are not tired of the war in Ukraine.
Also, when it comes to security guarantees for Ukraine, the key role is played not by the US but by Europe itself.
The latest statement by the Ukrainian president that it should be the military units of the United Kingdom and France present on our country's territory as a guarantee of those very security issues after a possible peace agreement is reached. This is a vivid political signal to both the United States and the Russian Federation. And
now the head of the European Commission, Kaja Kallas, will form the EU's position on Ukraine, and she emphasizes that any agreements to end the war must be discussed with Ukraine.
If Ukraine's NATO membership is no longer on the table, then we need to look at what security guarantees are actually tangible. These can't just be, papers or promises. There have to be, real troops, real capabilities so that Ukraine can defend itself.
It is precisely thanks to Europe's support at the negotiating table that Ukraine feels this assistance and can confidently defend its interests before the US when it comes to ending the war.
the position of the European partners was taken into account by the American partners when forming the so-called points of the peace agreement. Europe's position is taken into account by the United States and accordingly by the Russian Federation in the plans and further military technical assistance to our country, as well as accordingly in the political decision regarding ending the war in Ukraine.
Negotiations, money, and political will. These three lines converge at a single point. Europe makes it clear supporting Ukraine is a strategic and long-term choice.
Donald Trump's attitude toward Vladimir Putin is rapidly deteriorating. The operation in Venezuela exposed the Kremlin's colossal weakness. The White House is openly mocking Russia's air defenses, while the U.S. Department of State warns the bunker dweller on social media not to play games with Trump. Details in our report.
Donald Trump is believing less and less of what Vladimir Putin tells him. Here is the reaction of the US president aboard the presidential plane Air Force One. There, he stated that he does not believe Ukraine struck Putin's residence in Valdai.
I don't believe that strike happened. Something significant happened quite nearby, but it truly has nothing to do with this particular matter.
When a journalist asked him to clarify why, after his phone conversation with Putin, he initially believed him, Trump said that it was the first information he had heard regarding the strike on the residence. He said that his house had been attacked. We don't believe that it happened now that we've been able to verify it. Trump also intends to impose new sanctions against Russia if the Kremlin does not make concessions in negotiations. Senator Lindsey Graham, who was also on board the presidential plane during questions about the strikes on Putin's residence, emphasized that the issue of sanctions against Russia is discussed every day. But for now, this information is not for disclosure. The Republican senator also stated that in his view, peace in Ukraine will be achieved under the threat of tariffs against Putin's clients. Graham is convinced that the example of India, which reduced its oil purchases from Russia after Trump imposed tariffs, shows that this approach works. The attitude of Trump and the United States toward Putin and Russia is rapidly deteriorating. This has become especially noticeable after the special operation in Venezuela. After Maduro's arrest, Pentagon chief Pete Hegseth openly mocked Venezuela's air defense system, which had been purchased from Russia. 3 nights ago, nearly 200 of our best Americans entered the center of Caracas. It seems that Russian air defense system didn't work so well, did it? They captured a man wanted by American justice without losing a single American citizen. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also voiced the Trump administration's attitude toward Russia and the U.S. position on Venezuela's future. He made it clear that the United States will not allow Venezuela to become an operational hub for Iran, Russia, or China. Moreover, according to Rubio, the U.S. does not need Venezuelan oil since the country has enough of its own resources. The main goal is to prevent Russia and other rivals from increasing their influence in Venezuela's oil sector. This is the Western Hemisphere. We live here, and we will not allow it to become an operational base for adversaries, competitors, and rivals. Washington will primarily restrict investments from Russia, China, and Iran in Venezuela's oil industry. The interest of these countries in Venezuela's black gold is no coincidence. After Maduro's arrest, the US wants to resume the operations of its companies in Venezuela and increase the country's budget revenues. The Putin and Maduro regimes have been strategic partners since 2006. The Kremlin gave Caracas nearly $20 billion in loans in exchange for loyalty and support. Now, after the arrest of the Venezuelan dictator, Russia has lost yet another ally. And with these actions, the US is putting pressure on Putin, signaling that he will have to make compromises in peace negotiations with Ukraine.
If the Americans come in and set up production, the taxes that American companies paid to the Venezuelan budget as royalties for developing state-owned resources were significant. And as we know, in the 1960s and 1970s, before nationalization and then after, so to speak, the rise of the Chavez and Maduro regimes to the political stage, Venezuela was practically the richest country in Latin America.
It seems that Trump and his administration have radically changed their attitude toward Putin and his policies and have fully taken Ukraine's side. At the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, which took place on January 6th, the United States was represented by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. From Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky and the new head of the office, Kirilo Budanov, arrived in Paris. The main topic is security guarantees and the deployment of a U.S. military contingent on Ukrainian territory.
The start of 2026 is a real catastrophe for Russia. Oil refineries are burning, power plants are in flames, entire districts are left without electricity, and Moscow is bracing for a total blackout. So what lies ahead for this fallen quasi-empire? To put it mildly, the outlook is grim. Here are the details.
Russia is waking up more and more often without electricity, heat, or any sense of stability. Almost every day, there are new strikes on the energy infrastructure. Massive oil refineries and numerous thermal power plants. It's quite a significant mess. And again, oil refineries. Entire districts are losing electricity, and along with it,
the process of heating, which involves the transfer of thermal energy to increase temperature, is a fundamental concept.
Accidents at thermal power plants, fires at oil refineries, and large-scale blackouts. These are no longer isolated incidents, but a systemic pattern in Russia.
Everything that mirrors the war onto the territory of the Russian Federation can undoubtedly be considered a success. Ukraine has done exactly what Russia did not expect.
In many regions of Russia, a power plant shutdown means not only darkness, but also cold. People are left without heating and hot water, even in places where there have been no strikes on infrastructure.
If you had never done it before, filling an entire bathtub with snow just to go to the bathroom so it would melt and you'd have at least some water. If you always had that, then everything was always fine for you. I came to get water so I could wash the dishes.
But if such failures happen even without Ukraine's involvement, the question arises, what's going on with Russia's energy infrastructure?
If they're still somehow managing with the cities, the Russians try to resolve the issue, somehow carry out repairs as quickly as possible. How well that works out for their energy infrastructure is another question. But when it comes to villages, obviously, villages aren't electorally important. Not many people live there, so Putin, excuse the slang, just doesn't care.
What's surprising is that even in Russia, people understand that their situation is far from ideal.
If we carefully look at the official information about precisely how worn out our essential utility system is right now, it becomes rather profoundly alarming. And if you then add significant external impacts to that, honestly, it truly doesn't inspire much optimism.
Oil refineries are a particularly vulnerable point. They support not only Russia's economy, but also its formidable army.
Significant problems frequently arise both during essential repairs at large-scale oil refineries, because that particular process invariably requires a substantial amount of financial investment and a very great deal of valuable time to complete, and also with the complex task of repairing the intricate logistics networks, which often has a profound and far-reaching kind of house of cards effect. Consequently, when you cause one critical element to collapse or fail, all the other interconnected elements tend to collapse simultaneously at precisely the same time.
Repairs drag on, reserves are insufficient, and the winter period only amplifies the consequences of accidents.
These systemic problems with energy in the Russian Federation have become extremely difficult to solve, both because of money and because of the lack of all the necessary components for repairs, since some of them are, again, import dependent. In other words, Russia does not produce them itself, but buys them from abroad. And this is where, once again, the sanctions mechanisms come into play.
Of course, the bunker dweller spares no money for war, but when it comes to heating the homes of his citizens, he is very stingy.
Naturally, the level of discontent is rising, and this discontent is no longer just in rural areas where blackouts happen. Now, this negativity is actually concentrating in the big cities.
An energy crisis, even without Ukraine's involvement, is becoming a new reality for Russians. It's expensive, risky, and increasingly unmanageable.
Just one day, say, with temperatures at minus 20 degrees, in conditions where there is no heating, can destroy the entire system. So we really hope, of course, that it won't come to that. It's important to monitor specifically to ensure that the heating plants aren't damaged, especially if, for example, the strikes on thermal power stations continue.
When blackouts and lack of heat occur even without external interference, it speaks to the state of the system. For Russia, such failures are increasingly becoming the norm, and with the involvement of friendly drones, it's turning into a completely new reality.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.